to have you back on stage. Yesterday I just gave a very brief introduction of yourself, but I'd love for you to break us in again on who is Dr. Harrison. I mentioned you as accomplished, but probably the audience needs to know more about you before we unpack the two subjects.
All right, thank you very much. And just off the head. Yes. Okay, my name is Dr. Harrison Naji, and I'm the group CISO for First Bank and its subsidiaries. I'm a cybersecurity practitioner, a tech practitioner, and across the path, I've done a lot of things, right, within the tech space, from project management, network management, incident management, coaching, mentee management, and a lot of all that. And in the course of all this also, I have done a lot of what you call preparations, right? Both on certification side and on education side. So I'm not just a doctor, I also have 4 masters, right? And it's not just about the masters, it's about the focus, right? So because one of those,
you
one of those, yeah, it's really
casually.
So when you say formal, it's not really about. It's not like an artifact collection, right? It's really focusing on core areas that are really important to me in the course of my work. And as we begin to discuss this topic, you will understand why someone that plays the kind of role I play will have to be a life learner, right? You have to continuously learn. So when you start discussing cloud, you need to deepen your knowledge on cloud. So one of my masters is in cloud security, covering all the major cloud environments. So, and I also do a lot of engagement like this, just to, again, continue to share and encourage people to pick up skills that are really relevant, okay? And also pay attention to emerging technologies.
Yes.
Right? So, because then what it does help you do is to continue to prepare for the future and make you ready and make you very ready for the evolving challenges that is coming, okay?
Oh, fantastic. And that
I'm also a father, right? And, yeah, it's very important. And I have a family, lovely family.
that's the 5th master's. Actually, that's a PhD level qualification.
I'm also concluding another PhD, actually.
Oh, wow.
But that's on offensive cyber engineering. Really, some interesting cyber. So now we are doing a lot of defensive.
Yes.
So when you start to talk about wars, cyber wars, and all that, you move into the offensive, where you now begin to use cyber as a tool, right? Yeah, so.
That's a great place to now get into our first question to look at. We talk about leadership, and leadership has many facets. But in your opinion, what is leadership in the facet of cybersecurity and what we need to develop more? Borrowing from what you talked about yesterday, that we are yet to face real challenges, and we need to kind of like prepare ourselves for that.
Okay, so I would say when it comes to crisis or cybersecurity, a leader must have a sound mind, right? You must remember that when you have chaos, you are either solving the problem or you're part of the problem being solved, right? So you can actually have a leader who complicates issues, right? And in that case, that leader is a problem that needs to be solved during the crisis or during the security conversation. So soundness of mind is key. It's actually becoming even far more important than technical skills, right? And you have to be a good communicator. Today we talk about security, we talk more on the tech. Do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have that? Have you deployed this solution? And when you have vendors come around you, it's usually about tech. But security is also about people.
Yes.
So you have to be able to communicate right. So that leader has to have very viable communication skills and also understanding how to communicate to the tech team and how to communicate to board of directors and how to communicate to the business team. Okay, that leader also have to be a crisis manager. somebody that understands crisis, understand that things can go wrong, understand that if an organization assumes that they will not have crisis, they will not have 200 people in the IT team. So it's really not about an organization thinking that something won't go wrong. It's an organization positioning that if something goes wrong, it should be tackled immediately, okay? And that leader also have to have skills.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very important. Whether that skill is tech skills, soft skill, hard skill, you have to have skills. You have to have evolving skills. So what it means is that sometimes you may find out that what you already know is your problem. Yeah, which means you have to first unlearn before you start learning, right? So very important that that leader is also need to be adaptive. You know, sometimes you have an issue and a leader says, oh, bring the rule book. Let's go by the rule book. But the reality is that the environment may have shifted from the rule book, right?
Yes.
So that leader has to be adaptive. And the leader also need to understand the kind of leader he or she is. Yeah. Some are very autocratic. And I say, yes, when an issue happens and you know the end-to-end and you know what needs to be done, it can be autocratic. You can give directive and deal with the issue.
Decisive about it.
Yeah, but when the solution is not clear, it can't be autocratic. You need to talk to people, right? Because the solution may be to the next person you're not allowing to speak, right? So that's part of the things you will see. Now, there's also that negotiation skill that is important, especially when you're negotiating with vendors, when you're negotiating with the business, when you're negotiating with the CIO, when you're negotiating with the board. You must have capability to provide and argue value points. And some of these are things that you have to have in the face of succeeding as a leader within this space.
To build up on that, you know, for many of us in this room, you may probably even go an entire career, just like you would in the military, without having seen war. So how do you, in that context, sharpen your skills as a leader to make sure that you're ready for any eventuality? Because we're always saying, you know, it's not a function of when or if, but the truth is some of us may go through our entire career without ever having seen blood. No one ever attacked your systems. Maybe they did, you didn't know, but you never really quite saw your day at the front line. How do you sharpen yourself, or how do you keep yourself ready for any eventuality?
So the reality is there is no, I mean, how long are you going to live? Maybe 100 years, maybe 120. So you cannot live long enough for everything to happen to you personally.
Yes.
Right. It's not possible. So you mean you have to learn from others. You have to learn from what has happened to others. You need to pick up reports. Some of the incident reports are like 800 pages, 1,300 pages. You need to pick up incident report and read them so you can understand what exactly happened, what has been documented, right? You need to improve your threat intelligence so you can understand what is happening within your ecosystem, what is happening within your environment. Then that helps you understand. And when you check, for example, and I say again, sometimes you need to do some kind of random checks where you pick up, for example, you a CISO, you go online and pick up JD for CISOs and use it to assess yourself. Do you understand? Especially you look for JDs that are correct. So if there are JDs that have been produced in 6 months, you can pick it up and check and understand what is being expected from a CISO and the kind of skills you have. That helps you to begin to understand the gap you have. And again, be open. I mean, be open, join associations, watch people speak. Sometimes I have a CISO that is a very solid pen tester, right? So you find out that just like the carpenter, you bring everything back to the nail. So every conversation goes back to pen testing, just because that his value points, right? But in reality, pen testing is just one domain. There are so many other things that he is not very versed in. So that's again where you can begin to understand this topic being discussed within the CISO committee. Am I deep in it?
Yeah.
And if you're not, then you begin to now look at options. And again, the issue of emerging tech, for example, you can't continue to say no to what you don't understand, because no is actually one form of resistance. So whatever you do not understand, you say no to it, okay? But the reality is that the landscape have moved away from that. So it's now more on yes, but, right? we will do it, but we need to take some actions. And that can only be built on knowledge.
Would you advise then for someone to be almost a T-shaped individual, to say, as a CISO, I'm generalist enough, but then I get to focus on, if I'm a pen tester, I get to focus on that line, or what sort of balance should there be?
So a CISO is accountable for everything. Yeah. Yes, it's also good to have foundational knowledge, including business, including strategy, right? But then you have to develop, in some cases, you do not need an expert knowledge across all the domains.
Yes.
If you have it, very important, right? But you have to have certain level of knowledge to be able to discuss it and appreciate it and understand it, right? So when your team colleague raises a point, you find out if you're not
out of your depth.
Yeah, you struggle, right? In some cases, you actually struggle to the point of avoidance. And that's worse, which means you stop getting involved in conversation just because you are not able to converse very well, right? So yes, I advise that a CISO should have breadth, yeah? But you should also have depth, yeah, in certain areas. But breadth is key because then it helps you to appreciate your environment. Like if we say, for example, what is my organization exposed to, right? Phishing, but that's not the only thing they're exposed to. There's so many things they're exposed to. And you have to have breadth to be able to know all your attack surface, right? So you can begin to now coordinate. And it helps you also when you're having that top-down or down-up conversations. Yes, so I advise a CISO is key for a CISO to have breadth, yeah? And that breadth, remember, can either come from your own personal learning or engaging your team also, and calling your team to explain to you. I mean, knowledge is no longer what you say, for example, I have 100 years experience, because of that I'm the most experienced. It's not true. Some knowledge are just 2 years old. So if you have 100 years, it was not there for 98 years, right? So, yes.
And also some team members could have lived-in experiences from different organizations that probably were not exposed.
You need to open for example, for me, I run sessions, right? You need to allow people to breathe. You need to allow people to explain. You need to allow people to share experience and contribute. You understand? Because then, in some cases, that may not be the idea that will work, but it may trigger the idea that will work, right? So yes, you need to also be a very good listener.
Excellent. Yeah. Let's pull a point of weakness that we spoke about yesterday, about we may all be great at inoculating our own organizations, but one of the greatest risks that remains is in supply chain. So looking at the cybersecurity threat landscape across the continent, what have you seen, or how do you advise us to go about also making sure that our supply chain, and I don't know to what nth degree we can do this to essentially make sure that we are protected down to that level?
Okay, so supply chain is a key issue. And because you cannot afford to do everything by yourself today. You cannot, if you look at banking, we've moved away from brick and mortar, we've moved away from digitalization, we've now in full digital ecosystem platformization, right? Which means you have to work with others. So yes, you must have third parties. You must provide service across the chain. In some cases, you may not understand, but some cases to render a service may go through 3, 4 to 7 organizations, right? Because someone needs to pick it up and every other person needs to do whatever they need to do for that service to go through. So it then means you cannot isolate yourself. So you have to work with people. So what will you do? You first assume everybody is not trusted. Yeah, you have to not trust anybody. And I would say you have to start by getting your contracting well when it comes to SLA and all that. So things like a right to audit is key. Being able to go into your partner environment and say, I want to see what is happening here, okay? You also need to be able to do risk assessments to know how you grade your partners. Who is your top risk partner? There are actually partners that are very risky, but you have to work with them because they're the only one providing the service. All your competitors are providing that service, so you can't. Right? But you need to mark them as high risk. In fact, in your network architecture, you can actually bring them in as a public internet meaning that you have to clean all the traffic coming from them, and you have to watch the direction of that traffic and make sure that only what is permitted. Actually, you can pass that traffic through a scanning session where you can make sure that every packet coming from them, you can scan it deeper. Then you also need to hold them accountable, which is when you audit your third party, you also need your third party to audit other people. And you also need to include transparency and declaration. So what it means is that if I give you a service to provide for me, I want to know when you're subletting that service to another person.
Yes.
I want to know when you're handing that service over to another person so I can make decisions. Because that's the worst. Where, for example, you give a contract to a third party, and that third party contracts that out. And as the cost goes down, you expect governance and other things, because governance is expensive. Mm. Do you understand? So that's also key. But again, adopt the zero trust. I always say no organization is zero on zero trust. You're practicing it in some way, right? So what it then means is you need to be intentional. And say for my third parties, I'll trust no one, right? And I want also, one of the things we've also done is to say, if a third party suffers an incident, I want to know within 24 hours. So either you suffer a ransomware, you suffer any kind of breach, I want to know. So I need to know so I can check and make sure that I am shielded. Mm-hmm. We are shielded from that organization. So those are some of the things. So it's key that you understand you cannot avoid third parties. That's one. You get your contracting rights. You ensure that there's transparency in the contracting chain when you're working with that third party, okay? You also know if the third party, for example, because when you talk about third party, it can come in different ways. There are transactional third parties. There are also what we call consumables, people that just supply and suppliers, right? Even in supplies, you also need to know whether your third party is sourcing from the channel or sourcing from gray markets. Do you understand? Because when you source from channel, you have higher chances that you're getting the product that had not been modified. When you source from gray market, in some cases, the product has been modified. Mm. It's cheaper? Yes. But it has been modified.
Would you say that does that role sit with the CISO, or does it now sit with procurement? It seems like it's a...
CISO is an interested party.
Yes.
I always say you cannot transfer accountability. Mm-hmm. So it means that if procurement is the one in charge of that, you have to engage procurement to make sure that this is taken care of. You may not be the one doing it. Responsibility can lie anywhere, but accountability, that's what we are talking about, personal liability. The CISO is accountable, so you need to engage procurement and ensure that is included in your own procurement process.
What are your thoughts then about if you've got a budget as a company and you've got probable supply chain vulnerabilities because they don't have budget? Your thoughts around maybe because you have the budget, being able to take some of these underutilized licenses. Like one of the presenters yesterday said, you've got organizations that have bought the full stack arsenal, but only utilizing 20%. About maybe distilling that, down to your supply chain as well.
No, take that again.
So you find that some organizations have the funds and they've invested in the best of the best. But even internally, they're not utilizing the capacity to maximum, 30-40% utilization. Thoughts around maybe saying, hey, because we've got this awesome tool that can do everything, and we've got the licenses, some that are unutilized, how about we take that down and share that value with with partners? Because like you say, governance is expensive. You can't transfer accountability. Yet, if the breach happens because of a supply chain risk, it's going to impact you. So what do you think we should be able to do that? Or how else do we transfer that value down?
So I missed that question again.
From the top. Mm-hmm. Company X has a $1 million budget. But there are few organizations in their supply chain that do not have either the technical capability or the budgets to invest in cybersecurity tooling. Do you think it is prudent for us to then start looking at a different way of doing business? Because we're locking ourselves up in a room with steel doors, but the moment we walk out, we're vulnerable. So saying, because we have the budget, can we then support our supply chain to make sure you're inoculated?
No, that's actually happening now.
Okay.
So if you look at, for people that use MasterCard, for example, there's a tool MasterCard had given some of their customers called Risk Recon. Risk Recon just helps you look at the third parties you work with, especially on their web presence. And they're giving it for free, right? So yes, you can do that, but you can include that in your contract. Do you understand? You know, sometimes when it comes to transactional third parties, there's some revenue sharing, right? So that's what you can do. Okay, can we do 70, 30? So I will take 70, you take 30. Okay, can I reduce it to, can I do 80, 20? Then I can give you these capabilities. Do you understand? So yes, that's very possible. And it's actually happening as we speak here. Because again, at the end of the day, when there's a breach, you will look at who will suffer more.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's not only about the losses, it's also about the impact on the organization. It's about the reputation, it's also about your customers. Do you understand? So if you see a way you can bridge gaps for your third parties, right? And in some cases, I have seen where organizations say, okay, I can send 2 of my engineers to work with you. I have sent engineers into the organizations of our third parties to say they're struggling with things, and I say, hey, our engineers can fix it. So you just sort this flight ticket, and then we can send it. So we did, and there's third one, we can resolve all the issues. Yeah, so that's possible. It's really, at the end of the day, it's not about collaboration, at the end of the day. Because you see what you do under the carpet, really, customer don't say it.
Correct.
All customer needs is that the service is available, the service is reachable, the service is usable, right? So anything you need to do that is healthy, please go ahead. But I'm saying once you are doing that, make sure the contracting is right. Yeah.
Excellent. During Dr. Bright's presentation, I mean, we had a time where the internet or connectivity was an issue. And yesterday, we also spoke about the fact that Africa is still a dark continent in terms of connectivity. We've not faced the worst of the worst. Shock us a bit and, maybe paint a picture of what this coming madness would be like once, connectivity, gets better and better, and every single phone, every single person has access.
Okay, so let me give you an example. So you had a situation where an organization bought a solution. And the solution was, so they went even on sightseeing across Europe, right? And the solution was working seamlessly. People were enjoying it, right? And then it was brought into an African country and implemented, and it didn't work. I mean, it didn't work. They did everything right, but it didn't work, just like Nokia. They did everything right. Do you know what the problem was? That technology was built on 5G, right? It was a 5G embedded technology. Wherever it was used was 5G. Then you bring it to a place where people are struggling with GPRS, struggling with 2Edge, struggling with 3G, 4G. It didn't work. So yes, you have a situation when you open the pipe, then certain attacks can come in. Your torrents of attacks can come in.
Yes.
Right? Then you now begin to understand that when people are doing mining, I don't know if we do crypto mining and all that, that quantum computing is key, that for you to be able to mine from everywhere, okay, and do all that. So yes, as the pipes get wider, other things can come through, right? So if you look at things like unmanned attack today, so you want to set up an attack and you need to go everywhere and come back in milli or nanoseconds, right? Then if you don't have that pipe, what will happen? You begin to have latency issues, then it will. If you look at streaming attacks, if you want to stream an attack today, you won't succeed because the pipeline is not there. Yeah. It's like when you do robbery and you come into a traffic jam. There's nothing, you can't escape. So if you're going to plan robbery today, you need to make sure that the roads are clean so that you can get away. Yeah. So yes, things will come as pipes get open. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'd like to open this to the plenary. Do we have any questions for Dr. Harrison? I see. Hand up already. One hand there, another hand at the middle row here.
Thank you, Harrison. So my question is about the disconnect in the practice. So you find more often than not when an attack happens, an organization has been attacked, that same organization, an external auditor had come and given them a clean bill of health. Internal audit had given them a clean bill of health. They had the best tools. So where is the disconnect? Because we are doing everything right, but still it's happening. So in practice, from your experience, where is the disconnect?
Okay, I can take the question. Okay, so let me first explain audits, VAPT, standard VAPT, control assessment. Always realize that it's dependent on three things. First is the scope. Second is the time they have. Third is the skill of the person, right? So if you have an unskilled auditor, right, come in and say you have RPA, for example, you're doing a robotic process automation, and you have an auditor that have been auditing manual processes, right?
Yes.
And he has just 3 days to do audit an organization. What do you think will happen? He will not do much. So when I talk about if you find it in one place, you personally need to look for it every other place. It's because audit is a sampling exercise. It's a sampling exercise. Penetration testing, VAPT is the same thing, a sampling exercise. So you need to give them a scope, and they will sample that scope. Even in that, remember that you can be clean now, and in the next second, you're not, because things are emerging, okay? And sometimes we think attack is purely because you have a system that is weak. No, attack can also be on a process. It can also be on a process, which means you follow through that process and you commit the crime you need to commit. And again, sometimes we do assessment and we use automated tools to run the assessment. But there are attacks that automated tools cannot find. If there's a problem in your architecture, automated tool will not find it. Do you understand? There are so many attacks that automated tools will not identify. That's why you need to combine. Okay? Another question is, I have tools, best of breed tools. Why is it not working? Sincerely, it's like you have a speed car and you're running it within at 40 kilometer per hour. You need to see the major problem we have here is that organization will invest $10 million to buy a tool. Then when it comes to training, they say no. You say come here and train them. Do you understand? So sometimes you see training as favor, or they're going to earn Estaco, they're going to earn dollars. So why not, instead of sending 10 people for training, you call the trainer to come in and train them, right? And what will happen? The major trainers will not travel. So they will send anybody, the alternate trainer, to go. Then he will not have the environment to do that training. And then the people will be distracted. So by the time you combine that training is purely an exercise. It's a compliance exercise. So what will happen? They will downgrade the technology to the level of their skill.
The understanding, yes.
That's what will happen. So when you walk in, do you know that sometimes I've gone into an organization and they say this tool we have agreed to decommission it because it's not working. And I say, excuse me, this tool? No, there must be an issue. So let's re-architect it. Can we step back and rebuild and implement the tool? 5 years later, the tool is still working. So what was the issue? It was the skill, it was the knowledge to use the tool. Sometimes you find out, an incident had happened. You say, no, this box, if it had been checked, this incident will not happen because the capability was there, but it was not activated. The tool was not implemented well, it was not positioned well. And sometimes, again, we think, because I have technologies, that's enough to protect me. It's not enough. You also need to combine it with processes. You also need to combine it with people. So it is not impossible for everybody to give you clean bill of health, and you will still have an attack. That's why today we say you need to have an attacker mindset.
Yeah.
You need to pen test yourself. You need to check. Whenever you see something, ask yourself, how can this go wrong? How can this be managed? How can this be manipulated? If you check that, you will realize, in some cases, say something is wrong here. So yes, you have to have an attacker mindset. You cannot depend on a sampling exercise.
Correct.
To assess the risk in an entire ecosystem.
And also to what you said yesterday, Dr. Harrison, you said, even when people are doing these audit processes, your own IT people know where the cleanest part of the house is. That is where you take guests. You don't take them to the murkiest and dirtiest places where you know for sure you've not been covered. Hence, you get, the check boxes are all done and dusted, and you get a clean bill of health. Well, the truth is, even when you had the capacity or you have the tools, you haven't quite implemented them in the way that they're supposed to. Let's take, there was a question on this side, and I think we'll take, the team says we are bad for time, so ladies and gentlemen, do help me appreciate Dr. Harrison.
My friend.